Lowe's knows what makes SpringFest savings even better are member-only doorbuster deals. Right now, rewards members can save $40 on an Allen & Roth Chesler Gold faucet. Was $99, now $59. Plus, save $110 on a Cobalt 40-volt battery trimmer and blower combo kit. Was $279, now $169. Lowe's, we help, you save. Valid through 3/24 while supplies last. Program subject to terms and conditions. Details at lowes.com/terms. Subject to change.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
Uh-oh, the last cookie.
You can get a new box of cookies in as fast as an hour with Walmart Express Delivery.
Are you my guilty self-conscience?
No, I'm the voice offering you promo code EXPRESS for free delivery on your first order.
Hey, who ate my cookies?
You mean, these cookies?
Order now. Welcome to your Walmart. Promotion valid for first express delivery order. $50 minimum subject to availability. Restrictions apply.
This episode is brought to you by Audible.com, the internet's #1 place for audiobooks, where you can find anything and everything for your animation fix. In this episode, we're going to be talking about tons of different animation books, from animation legends, animation historians. One book that I absolutely love is Disney War. It covers the history of Walt Disney Animation and just the conflicts that happened in the studios and how they were able to rise from the ashes and how the Renaissance began. Really, this covers the Eisner era and all the drama and everything that happened, the good, the bad, and the ugly of Disney during that time. If you're an animation fan and a Disney fan, this is an important time in history to understand, so that way you can better understand where the studio is now and how this really built the foundation for the studio going forward. Go to rotoscopers.com/audible and you'll get your free credit, so that way you can check out Disney War or tons of other audiobooks for yourself.
This episode is brought to you by Audi. The road is calling. Embrace the thrill of the drive with the all-new, fully electric Audi Q6 e-tron. Featuring effortless power, serious acceleration, and advanced Audi tech. It's not just a new EV, it's a new way to experience driving. The all-new, fully electric Audi Q6 e-tron is here. The next chapter of Audi starts now.
I can say to my new Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra, hey, find a keto-friendly restaurant nearby and text it to Beth and Steve. And it does, without me lifting a finger. So I can get in more squats anywhere I can. 1, 2, 3.
Will that be cash or credit?
Credit. 4.
Galaxy S25 Ultra, the AI companion that does the heavy lifting so you can do you. Get yours at Samsung.com. Compatible with select apps. Requires Google Gemini account. Results may vary based on input. Check responses for accuracy.
Hey, Fidelity. What's it cost to invest with the Fidelity app?
Start with as little as $1 with no account fees or trade commissions on U.S. stocks and ETFs.
That's music to my ears.
I can only talk.
Investing involves risk, including risk of loss. Zero account fees apply to retail brokerage accounts only. Sell order assessment fee not included. A limited number of ETFs are subject to a transaction-based service fee of $100. See full list at fidelity.com/commissions. Fidelity Brokerage Services, LLC, member NYSE, SIPC.
You're listening to the Animation Addicts Podcast with the Rotoscopers, episode 292, Pencils versus Pixels. 2D is not dead. Welcome to the Animation Addicts Podcast with the Rotoscopers, the #1 place to get your animation fix with animation addicts just like you. Each episode, we dive into the wonderful world of animation featuring Disney, DreamWorks, Pixar, and everything in between. From hilarious discussions and movie reviews to interviews with industry insiders, this show's mission is to brighten your day through our love of animation. So hop on your nerdy couch, grab some snacks, and get ready to hang out with your animation besties, because it's time to dive into today's episode.
Hey there, Animation Addicts. I'm Morgan Stradling.
And I am Chelsea Robson.
Chelsea, are you team Pixel or team Pencil?
I've always been team pencil, so this has been fun to jump into.
I feel like most people are team pencil. I don't know anyone who's like, I don't like 2D animation.
Yeah.
Yet somehow just the masses, we'll talk about it, okay? We'll talk about it. This is a very interesting film. So in case you are wondering, welcome. This is the Animation Addicts Podcast. Each episode, we dive into a different animated film or topic. And today we are doing an animated documentary. Well, a documentary about animation. It's not an animated documentary. Sorry about that.
Yeah, yes.
That would be cool.
Adjective placement matters.
Yes, indeed. I mean, there have been animated movies in documentary style, like Surf's Up. But I can't think of a documentary where they say, hey, we want to cover this topic and we're going to animate the whole thing. I'm sure it exists, but I can't think of an animated documentary. Right. If you can, let me know in the show notes, rotoscopers.com/292. So this episode, we are going to be reviewing a new documentary called Pencils versus Pixels. It's available on Amazon Prime. You can rent it anywhere where you can rent digital copies of things. It's also available on Apple TV. Just came out this past November. So we wanted to cover it when it came out and just didn't get around to it. And I'm really excited that we got to now. I'm actually a little bit bummed that we didn't, because it would have been nice to support this film and everyone behind it. But
we're supporting it now, though. This is how we support.
Exactly. So without further ado, let's jump into it. All right, a few little details about the film. It's called Pencils versus Pixels. It was released November 7th, 2023. And the production companies are Hideout Pictures and Minute Hand Pictures. And that's really all the important things that you need to know about this. Because it was released on Apple TV, there really isn't any box office information, and we don't necessarily know the budget, but I'm sure it wasn't too much. I mean, it's pretty minimal as far as, it's just probably getting the rights to different animation clips and whatnot. But
yeah, and then paying the people to show up.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, they got some big names in here. So let's talk about the cast. Obviously, the narrator, which was needed, not needed, I don't know, was Ming-Na Wen, who she is the voice of Mulan. And so she's
a lovely girl.
Yes. So she takes the very, the beginning, she introduces it, and there's a few moments where she's interspersed, and then we see her at the end, and they have a really funny, cute bit at the end, which we'll talk about. But I didn't really feel like we even needed her per se.
Nah. So this was put together by the Bangkok brothers. We love them. And Tony was the director of Mulan. And obviously, if I were the director of Mulan, I would want to get Mulan back in whatever I did.
A Disney princess, of course.
I mean, who wouldn't? So I understand why he went for her. It was just one of those interesting things that it's like, I don't think it was needed, but it was nice. Yeah. I mean, I guess you needed a narrator to start at something, and could have been one of them, but obviously they'd rather put a pretty face up there. So Ming-Na does that. Like, she's a beautiful woman. Beautiful.
And then they have a variety of different animators and people who are in the industry, which I feel like as I was watching this, I was like, oh yeah, that person. Yes. Every time a different legend came on scene, I was just really, really pumped. So obviously they get the big wigs, they get the big guys, the big guns. Glenn King, James Baxter, obviously the Bancroft brothers, Andreas Deja, John Pomeroy, who is definitely worth a follow on Instagram if you haven't.
He's great.
And then they have then they have Aaron Blaze, Jorge Gutierrez, Alex Hirsch. And then they kind of have some different ones, which were interesting. They have Kevin Smith and Seth MacFarlane of Family Guy fame. And,
I appreciated his involvement.
Yeah. So
okay.
This isn't a strictly Disney film. This isn't covering the history of Disney animation, the rise and fall. It's just the 2D animation, how it transitioned into CGI. And so they cover a variety of studios, and they're no respecter of persons. And so Seth MacFarlane was big because he came after the wave of The Simpsons. And so Family Guy obviously was a big deal, and he was the main guy behind that. And I must say, after watching all of these other people, they would have different people, on their interviews and whatnot. And, they've all aged. It's been quite a while since, the 90s, right? But Seth MacFarlane has clearly gotten a facelift. I'm sorry. And I'm not sorry. It's just, he looks good, but it's so obvious when you compare to everyone else who's kind of just, because they're all men, and men typically don't go down that route. They just have aged naturally. And not that there's anything wrong with plastic surgery. I love plastic surgery. All right. But it was he looks the same. He looks kind of the same. So,
I mean, hopefully he also has good genes. You can probably throw that in there, but it was fun though to hear his voice, because I think of Seth MacFarlane and I hear Family Guy, obviously, because his voice is the voice of Family Guy.
Another one who I thought was really, really important that they got these two people. They got Leonard Maltin and Mindy Johnson. Now, Leonard Maltin is the esteemed animation historian. If you're going to go onto Amazon and buy a book about animation history, Leonard Maltin has many of them. One of his most famous is called Of Mice and Magic, A History of American Animated Cartoons. It's definitely worth a pickup if you don't have it. It will definitely take you
it's a good title.
Down the road of animation history, help you become more informed. Definitely worth it. And then they have Mindy Johnson, and Mindy Johnson also is an author and animation historian. She's famously did the Tinkerbell book, and she's done a variety of other things. So I like that they had both of those, because having these animation historians kind of grounded it a bit and just gave us a different perspective. We have directors, we have all the amazing animators, and then having the animation historians themselves were great. So I thought this was a really great cast. We got a good mix of people, and we're able to draw upon a lot of different influences.
I was a big fan.
Just the premise of this movie, it's basically taking us down memory lane and taking us back to the very beginning, talking about traditional animation, kind of where it started, specifically in the Disney studio, and how there were these masters, the 9 old men, who helped to cultivate their craft and really become experts at the traditional form of animation, and how they passed that on to the next wave in the 70s and then the 80s, right? And then there was this new guard, and then talk a little bit about the Disney animation, and then we introduce Pixar, and then CG animation, which really changed the game. And then we talk about how it changes from that point on. And it's called Pixels versus Pexels. Wait, Pexels. It's called...
Why do I always say Pexels too? Like, where did that come from?
It's called Pencils versus Pixels, but it's really not a competition amongst the two. It's just kind of saying, hey, it's basically, it's a better name than the history of traditional whatever.
Exactly.
So anyways, however, such a focus is the shift from 2D to CG animation, and Pixar is undeniable in their influence. They are the reason with Toy Story.
Yeah.
And I thought it was a real FU not to include John Lasseter. This isn't a Disney production. This didn't have anything to do with the Disney higher up saying, oh no, but Lasseter was the reason. And he's mentioned in there, one of the big things when they were testing this in the early 80s was there was this short in 1983 called Where the Wild Things Are. And it was done with John Lasseter and Glenn Keane. And then Glenn Keane goes off to create Pixar and go from there. And the fact that he wasn't included was just really offensive to the whole premise of this, because he was the guy to have. He was really the important impetus for this. And I don't know if he has these NDAs of him being pushed out of Disney. Sometimes they have different NDAs like, hey, we'll pay you off if you just don't talk about it for a while. And I don't know. But instead they include Pete Docter, which was fine. He's the new head of Pixar.
They did
I guess.
Get an old clip of John Lasseter.
Well, yeah,
though.
there are clips of Lasseter in there. But he himself was not able to be there to speak in his own words and share his experience over the years. And I thought that was a huge miss for the documentary. I would like to know why. And I feel like these guys aren't Lasseter haters. I feel like if they could have gotten him, they would have. So we'll just leave it at that. But
it probably was also almost a cop out because it's like all of these were from before the incident. So, it's fine because this is all history. We're not giving him a current platform, blah, blah, blah. So that's probably what I thought. I really liked how they laid out the whole movie. I don't know if you realize this, but it was laid out in a little bit of a hero's journey of the story of 2D animation, which I think is really cool. I honestly was not expecting that because I have seen so much. And I guess I just hadn't put the story together in the way that they did, but I've seen so much of just like, wah, 2D is gone, blah, blah, So to be able to see that they actually included this resurgence at the end was fun. I was like, oh, that's nice.
And when I was watching it, and you did say you looked on the IMDb that someone was like, oh, we've seen this before. And I will agree, as someone who's very heavily invested in animation and animation history, has read tons of books and basically any featurette, bonus feature, I've watched them all, right? This didn't feel necessarily anything new or exciting to me. And that's not the point. This is not meant for the animation addict. This is really a more general audience to help them understand what happened and why we are, how we get here and where's the future of animation. And that's fine. There's just so much that they could have covered that they really did the best they could, cutting everything down and really simplifying it. I mean, this could be a mini series, obviously, talking about each of the different eras and just like
each person.
Yeah. Or just like a whole episode on Toy Story and the impact that had. And there's so much to cover. And I really think they did a really great job in, boiling it down to the main important parts. So, we talk about, they have the pencil test and they say like, oh, really the essence of 2D animation is the pencil test. And I just really loved watching all of those pencil tests and keyframes. They're just so dreamy. Anytime I get to see an animation blog or in a book or just footage of tests, it's so amazing to me. And it's so captivating because they go to explain, Glenn Keane had a really good way of explaining it. When I'm drawing something, I'm not necessarily looking at the line. I'm looking at the part next to the line. And it's really in his mind, he's imagining the character and the line is just connecting the dots of this character that he has in his mind. And that's what these, frames from character pose are able to do. They're able to create that illusion of life. Another excellent book to add to your animation collection if you have not done that. We'll include these notes in the show notes for you a little later. So
anytime Glenn Keane got on there, I was like, Glenn. But anytime that he had, there was this one moment where they had the pencil test of Ariel coming on and she's just like, I don't know, just spinning her head or something. And I'm just like, it's so good. And I wonder, what is it exactly about the pencil, the 2D side that kind of, it was just really interesting how they did go through a round and where they asked all these people what their first movie was. Like, what was the movie that clinched the deal for you? This is what you were going to follow. And I was thinking about it, I'm like, okay, I'm not an artist, but what was it for me that made me an animation addict? And it was definitely Beauty and the Beast. Anytime that came up on, I was like, yeah, that was definitely the thing that really tied me in. And then, but every time that they showed all of these movies, I really wanted to go back and rewatch 101 Dalmatians, Sleeping Beauty, The Secret of NEM. I was just like, oh, these are so good. And I think that it's almost like it's a sense of communal nostalgia that is baked into animation. Like everyone's kind of looking back at the connection between somebody and what their hand does to turn something to life. And I think it's beautiful. What movies were you thinking of that were like, that was my clinching moment?
Well, I mean, obviously I'm a product, or the early Disney Renaissance was when I was kind of growing up and I really got to enjoy all of these hits and classics in the theaters again and again. So yeah, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin was a big one. I'd say those were kind of the main ones that I sat there and was like, wow, like Aladdin, looking at Jasmine. Wow. That was me. Yeah. But it was really, and I've said this before many times on the podcast, there were periods when on the VHS of these releases, they would include what's coming next. And sometimes they would even show the movie that was coming out a year later. And
the pencil tests from that.
And the pencil tests in those, they still are burned into my brain. They stand out. And they'd have pencil tests for Pocahontas or for Mulan, and the triangle cheats on Mulan, where they were going to put the rosiness on her cheeks. And those totally stood out to me because it helped peel back the curtain so I could see behind how these were getting made. And it really opened my eyes. And I think that's what one of the guys said in there is like, once you realize how these are made, your mind is just forever changed and you can't stop thinking about it. And not everyone is like that way, but I think there are certain people. And if you're an animation addict or an animator or just a lover of animation, you probably seeing the behind the scenes opened your eyes and created a sense of wonder. And I think what it is about the pencil test and just hand-drawn animation is that it's really one of the most direct ways of capturing the human idea, because all that's between you and a piece of paper and the animation is a pencil. And it's really the human element of drawing that allows that to be captured and then displayed on the movie. Whereas with computer animation, there's all these rigs and computer programs, and you're not really in control of the hair. Yes, you are, but they have to simulate the hair and then the cloth and the texture, and then they have to do all these simulations and programs to make it blow a certain way, and then you can maneuver the hair and the person the way that you want. Versus you're really a puppet master, but you're incredibly limited by the program, and there's so many boundaries. Whereas with computer animation, you're like, I want a bucket of water to fall on her head and then a fan to blow her hair. Like, you can literally create that. A master like Glenn Keane would be like, okay, cool. Like, here's the keyframes that I'm going to do. I'm going to do this. There's nothing holding you back except for your skill.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. And it goes through and it talks of, there's a big section of the 9 old men. And they're always one of my favorite things to talk about, like to look into, because there's just something that you cannot get away from somebody who is living in their excellence. And they definitely were.
Yeah. I mean, if you're going to study animation, you need to study the 9 old men. And I don't think that current Disney does this. I don't think they care about the 9 old men. I don't think they go back and reference the 9 old men and just the true 2D animation techniques that have built the backbone for what they are today. I don't think they care. And I think they kind of see them as antiquated, old news. Hey, we're bigger and better, and because we're new, we have technology, and we're so sophisticated. But I loved that there was a good emphasis on this because they were the masters of the craft, and I loved just to kind of explain, like, yeah, they weren't old; they were in their 30s and 40s. Yeah, but he just called them the 9 old men, kind of represent, in similitude of the 9 Supreme Court justices. So an important focus because it focused on the person behind animation, which is really the key to 2D.
Yeah. That's a big one. This week, I just started reading a book called 10X is Easier Than 2X by Dan Sullivan and Dr. Benjamin Hardy. And I highly recommend it. It's basically for entrepreneurs who are going out and trying to go to the next level. And he goes in and he talks about like the difference between wants and needs. And then the whole beginning is focusing on Michelangelo and how his search for excellence moved him from one medium to another. And I kind of just see a lot of the people who, the Glenn Keanes and the John Lasseters of searching for excellence, searching for that next thing, how that was a 10X moment of being able to add in the pixels to the side, which, I see that as everybody has their spot. Like, I don't ever see, and they mentioned this later on, that they never saw computer animation as their enemy. And it was just kind of like, whoa, look at like the new things that we can integrate and do these things. The reason I'm bringing this up is like it focuses on your unique ability. And I just feel like everyone at Disney for so many years was on the search for excellence. And even Walt, like he was on the search for excellence for something. And he started out as an animator, but then he realized he needed to not be the animator because his real search and his real excellence was being the visionary. And then you had other people like the 9 old men step up because their real excellence was the animation. And just kind of how these whole institutions are built based on people searching for their excellence. And one of the main things is I just see that I feel like there's a major difference now because in this, it also talks about the 2X kind of person is somebody who's not willing to really change what they're doing, but just do more of it. And if I can just do more of what I got, then I can, increase by 2X. But then the person who's doing the 10X is like, I can change, I can do it. I can look at it from a different way and search and be in my excellence. And so that's kind of one of the reasons as I'm watching this, it's kind of, to me, showing a really like every era of Disney is basically filtering out who is a 2X person and who is a 10X person. Like after the 9 old men, it went into the Xerox era, and which I really liked that era actually. But like it goes in later where you get into the darker days of Disney, and that's when Don Bluth leaves. And Don Bluth was a 10X guy, and he was like, "No, I'm gonna live in his excellence," and he's the one, and people followed him for that. And just it was very cool to see this book that I'm reading kind of laid out in front of me in all of the aspects of the history of animation. And I just think it's cool to be able to see that.
That's another person that was interesting we didn't get was Don Bluth. I don't know how recluse he is nowadays. I mean, we know where he is, but we could get a hold of it if we wanted to. But they did have John Pomeroy, so that's fine. Yeah. But again, it would have been a real home run for each of these key moments to have that person that instigated it to be the one talking about it. So a big departure, the departure of Don Bluth was a huge shakeup in the industry, because then Steven Spielberg, they released this film and Steven Spielberg said, wow, I didn't know that you could do stuff like this. And then it created his own TV shows. And then he produced other Don Bluth films. And it just really created a lot of competition that forced Disney to get their act together. And then likewise with Lasseter, he went off, and it would have been really nice to hear like the words of these men. Because we did hear from the director of Klaus. And I think Klaus was a really important one to talk about, as we'll get there. But again, it can't be perfect. It was great, but this is my wish list.
I just want to see my A team, the people that we grew up with. Like, he was the guy I really liked. And, just how Don was so cool. And I think this is a good point for me to ask you, have you framed my Christmas gift to you yet?
Not yet.
It was just a really cool thing that I found when we've gone through many moves in my house. And so every time you move, there's a purging moment. And I have no idea how this newspaper page made it through all the purges. But it was the day that Little Mermaid and All Dogs Go to Heaven came out. And it was like, hey, go and see these movies at your neighborhood theater. And it was just like, how in the world did this be I was barely alive. Why did my mom save this?
Yeah.
But I had it, and Morgan's like, I want it. I'm like, okay. So that was her Christmas gift of here's a day in the history. And I thought it was a really cool thing, because it was just like, wow, that's such a weird and crazy day to have in front of you.
Yes. I just love the time capsule of, oh my goodness. Okay. We're going to go to a movie. Let's look at the different theaters around town and let's see what movies are playing. And then what are the movie times? It just totally throw me back to a bygone era. So fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this movie was pretty timely with all of the Wish Walt Disney Animation Studios drama and how they've completely, rejected the work of the masters. Like I mentioned with the 9 Old Men, they've totally done away with the master/apprentice pipeline. From reports, what we hear, where before you would have a master animator and he or she would cover the main scenes and really be in charge of the character, but then they'd have apprentices who they would work with and they would help them with their scenes and they draw over their scenes and they teach them. And it's such a close relationship where you learned tenfold just simply by being in the presence of that person. You were given mediocre scenes or smaller scenes or maybe further back shots that didn't need as much detail, but just the fact that you were witnessing the hand of greatness and you had that mentor, it made a huge difference. And just how embarrassing is it that Disney and Jennifer Lee totally destroyed Walt's legacy in just a few short years? They've gutted the studio. They've gotten rid of all the masters. Anyone of the old guard who maybe said, hey, actually, let's do it this way, or this is the way we used to do it, has been thrown out. It is actually proven. There's lots of reports of it, and it's just pathetic. I'm sorry. It's how sad for Walt Disney Animation Studios. The only way that they can come back is by completely gutting house and then bringing back old masters. But as we've seen, sometimes when you gut house, the people don't come back. They've moved on. They go do other things. And the old guard, you can't get the old guard all back. So it's very concerning. I'm not saying you can't rebuild. You have to build small and build up, but it takes a lot of hubris. And there's going to have to be a big shakeup because the people in charge do not see themselves as the problem, and they were never going to step aside. So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the movie doesn't, this documentary doesn't go into really anything after Tangled. I mean, it mentions Frozen barely, but they're like, well, but Yes. But I'm saying at Disney, any of the Disney animation after Tangled. And while I do think that there's a lot of corporate 2X thinking in Disney right now, basically they're just like, this is how we do it. We're doing it the way we do it. And let's just do more of it. But I also think that there is a problem with the current Disney is because there is a fundamental shift in the culture from before being a place where excellence was the goal to being a place where let's subvert the masses and propagandize and spread our message. And it's so sad that they've completely, from reports, it seems as though they have completely lost the desire for excellence. But I do think that, like in the time of Down Bluth, it's just you're waiting for other people to just kind of step up and take over those, live in their excellence. And they have gotten to the point where they are excellent at what they do. So they need to live in it.
And in case you're wondering what the heck we're talking about, there's been a lot of reports by an outlet called Film Threat. They have a series. So right now it's a 5-part series called The D-Files. So if you would like to read what has been happening with Walt Disney Animation Studios from insiders sharing their anonymous experiences working for the company and working under Disney, Jennifer Lee, I will include a link in the show notes so you can read those. Every time a new one comes out, Chelsea and I have lots to say with each other about it. So that is fun time. So now let's talk about the Disney Renaissance. So the Disney Renaissance, we know, just changed everything. It's back, and I wonder, will we ever feel that again? Will we ever feel like, it's finally back? It just, the industry, not just Disney, just the industry in general feels so corporatized that it's hard to kind of see another big wave of resurgence like this. But I think John Pomeroy had a great quote. He said, competition breeds excellence. And another thing that I think was important during this era is that they just had universal classic ideas and themes. They weren't trying, like you said, to propagandize. They just, what's a universal theme that stood the test of time that we can build a movie around? And another thing is the characters in these movies, they believe that the impossible is possible. And I love that. The animation and the films of the early 90s and the Renaissance really stand up because they have these classic timeless themes. I love Aaron Blaise. Aaron Blaise is kind of known as like the animator for animals. He's just really kind of created that little niche for himself. And he was an apprentice for Glenn Keane on The Beast. And I just thought it was really cool that he was given a scene. He was very new, very fresh. And he was given the scene where Beast is being bandaged by Belle. And it's such a great scene. And he felt so overwhelmed and really unsure about it. But if you think about that scene, you can think about key poses where she's dabbing his arm. I mean, he was doing Beast, and then he pulls away and he's holding his arm because it hurts, right? And then he yells at her. And those are just the key amazing character animation moments that he's able to do. And
I mean, that was one of the key moments of the film of transition for Beast. Like, that's crazy that.
Well, yeah, we see him slowly change to, you're welcome. When she says, thank you for saving my life. And then he kind of says, you're welcome.
Yeah. And that's just such just so generous of Glenn to be able to take, one of the people that are, kind of moving up and give him such a big scene for the character. And he just talked about the teaching moments and how Glenn was able to help him be so much better in what he did. And it was just like, that is where there's so many soft skills that you can see and really take notice of when you're watching something like this, of like, okay, how did all of these people how did they really help each other out in the workplace and I love soft skills. Soft skills are great. And they're just it's such a inspiration to be able to see people when they do it well. So that was a really eye-opening moment for seeing both of them, how they interacted with each other.
And animation was so good at this point in time that they were getting nominated for Academy Awards, and Beauty and the Beast specifically was being nominated for Best Picture. And it was just such a screw the Academy moment, when they basically were like, we don't want those kids' films competing against our stuff. Right. And ultimately, 10 years later, they end up creating the Best Animated Feature category as a way to be like, you go in your corner over there. Like, don't even try to hit our zone. We don't want the great film to be tainted with animation. It was just, which
is so weird. It blows my mind because how much effort and how much work goes into a animated film to be able to have that much pull and greatness to looking at one of these other films of like, yeah, I get it that these are all actors, but all of these are actors with pencils. That's just, I don't know. As an animation addict, we can see how the Academy is wrong. But
I did appreciate the acknowledgement of The Simpsons, and what they really highlight with The Simpsons. It wasn't necessarily the animation that made a difference. It was the great writing. And we've talked about the writing of The Simpsons over and over and over again. They got these Harvard graduates, back when Harvard actually meant something, that they were so smart. They were so witty. And, we have Conan O'Brien being one of them, and just it was so smart. Simpsons was, most people probably don't think Simpsons as a smart show, but it was incredibly witty, very smart, very on the nose. And that's why the parody and the satire that they do just really hits, and why it really stood out. And then we're shifting from the shift to pixels, right? And this is where Pixar enters the game. And I just remember, this is, a little bit before Pixar, but Glenn Keane, he talks about he and John Lasseter, they went and saw some test footage of Tron and the motorcycle racing scene. And he and John Lasseter were just so bummed out after seeing that footage. It was like, oh, poor guy. You think it's over, when you're dedicated your whole life. But another moment they talk about is The Great Mouse Detective. And what they did in The Great Mouse Detective is they created the Big Ben clock cogs in computers, and then they printed each one of those out and had an animator trace over that. The woman said, this needs to blend in, and that really is the whole point. If you're going to be using technology or AI or any sort of, technology like that, the whole point is that it shouldn't look off. It should just feel like it's a part of it, and it should enhance your workflow or whatever you're able to do, so you're able to do it even better. And I think The Great Mouse Detective, even though it is the earliest form of it in a Disney animated film, it does it the best because it looks authentic. Mm-hmm. It doesn't look like it's a computer with weird computer textures and now it's dated. They just traced over. The computer was able to perfectly render the movements of the cogs, which that's something in early animation, like things that were very rigid and rigid like that versus like a human and softness and fur. They worked really, really well. That's why you see so many vehicles in early 2D animation and background props and stuff like that. So I loved it. And they said at the time, many of them did not view it as a threat. It was just something. It was a tool.
Dun, dun, dun. Then we have the slump. and that's just sad how there's a lot of aspects that can go into this. We can throw a lot of people under the bus for this. But in the end, I think we just need another Roy E. Disney to step up and to lead the charge and open up doors for other people.
Yeah. We talk about Eisner, and Eisner is a very interesting fellow.
To say the least.
Michael Eisner became the CEO in the 80s and ushered in the Renaissance and had some great times. And then the end of his tenure, the last 5 years were terrible. And this was the 2000 to 2005 before he ultimately left. And one of the things which is in the book Disney War, which we need to talk about, is that his number two. And really was a huge part of this was a guy named Frank Wells. And Frank Wells was really important for Eisner because he helped to, guide the ship and help him and bounce ideas off of. And when Frank Wells died in 1994, I think that's when the wheels started coming off the cart. Yeah. And he was able to do it based on a lot of things were in production and they had a lot of momentum. But then after a while, he just wasn't able to do it anymore. And I think that's where the slump comes in. It's the movies of the early 2000s. There were good ideas and things that they wanted to try. They just didn't land. And then, of course, you have things like Shrek, and they're really taking off, and other studios are spinning off and doing CG stuff. And the market is really resonating with it, even though they're absolutely terrible films, like films like Shark Tale, and you look back at that, you're like, what a garbage movie. But yet it did, crazy amounts compared to some of the traditional Disney stuff. And people are like, whoa, the market has spoken. It's like, oh no, people are just dumb. Okay. And so you have Roy E. Disney, who is Walt's nephew, and he's the son of Roy Disney, who was the two Disney brothers. And he comes in and does the Save Disney campaign. And it really created a lot of hullabaloo online. They didn't really go into this at all, but we know how it just completely shook up the industry. And he was willing to even step down if Eisner would step down. And we need another Roy to step up. And in my mind, I'm thinking, go Nelson Peltz, go Nelson Peltz. It feels so similar. It feels so similar what's happening now. That current leadership just does not get it. They're stale, they're long at the tooth. I mean, who the heck is Eigner's number 2 man? He doesn't have a number 2, and I don't feel like he's had one for a very, very long time. He just, this company has paid him way too well, and he's continuing to drink from this money well, where why would he possibly give it up? And he's surrounded himself and insulated himself with a board that is all just Iger sycophants, and they're just yes men, and they're going to do whatever he says, and they're not looking for shareholders' interest at heart. I'd be interested to see in the next few years. So if you don't know about the Nelson Peltz proxy fight, he is one of the largest single shareholders of Disney through his company, the Trion Group. And they tried to stage not a coup, but just hey, we'd like 2 seats on the board, and ultimately they didn't get it this time, which means I think it's a good thing, because next time this is set up to be a terrible year for Disney. Disney is clawing as like a tiger clawing at the cage, trying to get out, trying to escape any means possible. But it's they have no movies other than, Wolverine versus Deadpool, which isn't even that's not the Disney brand. It's terrible. No, I'm sure the movie's going to be great, but as far as the Disney brand, anyways, this is a total tangent for another day, but we need another Peltz. And every time that there's been these big shakeups in Disney or in the industry, things have gotten better. And as the result, it's bred competition and better products. So I just hope in the next few years, we say goodbye to Eisner and we're able to bring in a new wave of people, because it is due time. But Iger. Ultimately, who did I say? Eisner. Oh,
too many Michaels with
yeah. But ultimately in the 2000s, the stories just weren't there. And, they tried to blame audiences. I totally disagree. And I think all the animators agreed too. And when we were watching this, they get it. They know that it wasn't the 2D animation. It wasn't
the medium.
Yeah. The people at the top blamed the medium because they don't have the intricacies and the knowledge of, anything more than that. And I thought was really interesting that one of the Bancroft brothers said was the schedules and the money are exactly the same. And that really put it into perspective for me, because I think CG animation, it's just so quick, it's so fast, you can just bust it out. But he goes into great detail explaining, no, the time frame and the money is really the same. You have to schedule things differently, but really once you have your characters designed, you get going and you start animating on those sections. And the hand-drawn animation takes longer, but ultimately you get to the end product at the same time. In CG animation, you have so much time up front building the models, doing the character rigs, doing all the tests, making sure it is up to snuff, so that way you can animate and render and light and do everything that you need to. And really, once you get to that stage, it's pretty quick comparatively, right? And I really, really, really liked that. I thought that was such an important distinction and one of the main things that stood out to me. Because that, I think, is one of the things that the people at the top try to blame, is traditional animation is slow. It's old-fashioned. It takes too much time. No, it doesn't. Yeah. And another thing they said was, in this era where there was a lot of change and shakeup, in 2005, Disney shut down their studio for a period of time. And did you love to draw, or do you love to make things move? And that is where the moving and the shaking happened. The people who love to draw stuck with traditional animation, and tried to make it work. You have James Baxter, who, he had his own studio and he did the traditional 2D sequence in Kung Fu Panda. He did the traditional sequence in Enchanted and brought back all of these traditional animators. But then you have the other people who are like, well, I guess I like making things move. It doesn't really matter whether I'm drawing or not. Maybe I wasn't even that great of a drawer, or an artist. Yeah. And so I'm fine just moving to the character rig. And it really hit me when we were talking about this, how there was a we're kind of jumping ahead, but I think it kind of hits this, because this is where that nowadays there's a resurgence of 2D animation, and a lot of the millennials kind of moved on.
Yeah, they really got pushed out, actually. we just came up in a time where it was basically, by the time our generation got into the workforce, there was no jobs in 2D. And so they had desire. It was not just desire.
You didn't have this. You didn't have the pedigree or even just the 10,000 hours, if you will, in 2D animation to even attempt to make it work at a small studio. You just got out of school. All you've done is a paper, a flour sack animation and a ball and maybe a little student film that's very, very simple. And so, you get into the animation industry or you get into the workforce and it's 2D, it's traditional all the way. And so you jump into that. So I think a lot of the millennials just naturally, because of the market, shifted into traditional or to CG animation. Whereas people like Glenn Keane, the Bancroft brothers, Andreas Jaja, they had, decades or something, not everyone had decades under their belt, but some of them had just a few feature films under their belt where they were very confident and their skills had grown to a level where they actually had a skill set that could keep them on top as the market shrunk. The market shrinks, and so the need for talent lessened during this time. And so the top of the top were able to make it work, and everyone else needed to figure it out and go and do something else, whether that meant going to CG, which many, many did. And I just thought that was so interesting. And we'll talk about this. I guess we'll talk about it now. So now
let's get there.
There's Klaus, which there's this resurgence and rediscovery of hand-drawn animation with Gen Z, because Gen Z, wasn't entering the workforce as there was this big shift and this fight, pencils versus pixels. I really say late 2000s or not late 2000s, like 2008, 2009, 2010, that 2005 to 2010. That was really like the mover shaker era of you need to switch. You need to move. Things are, go to a different studio, make it work. These kids were just kids. They were little. They didn't have to worry about this.
They were drawing themselves.
Yeah, they were enjoying films. They were watching Disney movies and animated films, both CG and whatnot. And now
also they had like anime. They had like other, like all of my niece, like I have a niece who's just like hugely into anime. And she's like has been drawing animated like anime characters for years.
There's a lot more 2D influences, whereas the only anime we had was Sailor Moon and Dragon Ball Z.
Right.
And Pokemon, right? Like,
right.
About it.
What's interesting is like, did you know that Gen Z loves digital cameras?
I have heard
like,
that.
It's weird because it's like, these were the things that we had. And then it's like, oh, now we're all so cool. Like we can have like our generation was like, oh, we are embracing these things that get us out of what is like what we grew up with. So like we were really into like, let's combine all the things. Let's make things very simple. And now we have a big phone that has everything. But like Gen Z, they're actually, if you have a digital camera, you can put it on eBay or something for like $300 and you'll probably make it off of that, which is crazy. Like that's as much as you paid for it years ago.
I know.
But they love it. I was talking to a girl and she was just like, oh yeah, we love it because it kind of takes us back to when we were kids. So it's the nostalgic, but it's also a bit of I just think it's a different side of like Gen Z really and Alpha are really their desire for something more substantial than what millennials are giving them. What technology, while we kind of like embrace the technology, they grew up with it. And so,
and they've seen the good and the bad. And they don't necessarily feel that they have to embrace it because they're going to miss out. They see what it has done.
Yeah.
And so they're absconding it.
And I appreciate that. I'm like, go for it. So it's really cool to see how that has really come up. And when I had no idea that, I mean, we knew this when we reviewed Klaus, that it was a 2D animation, just because we looked it up, but it wasn't marketed as a 2D animation. It was just animated movie, and I think that was an interesting as he, just once again, one small act of capitalism. Klaus is just it's one of my favorite like examples of just go out and do something and make something out of your own situation. And that is exactly what the director did.
Yeah, Klaus really, really changed the game. And it's disappointing to me because you know how I feel about these online exclusive releases. Netflix obviously is a huge deal. It essentially is like a box office, but because it's not a box office and people don't necessarily, we're not able to see the number. You're not paying to watch Klaus. You're paying to watch a library of films. We don't get to see, how the market is reacting to different things. But Klaus was incredible. And it just, the fact that it is 2D and people don't realize that, but they love it is great. And I thought it was just such a funny moment that the director is like, well, we never pitched it as 2D. We just pitched it as the movie and they accepted it. And in this marketplace, that's so genius. Yeah. They had a fully rendered, they were able to use more technology to make it look and have the textures of CG, but behind on the back end. And the reason it moved the way that it did and like felt real and felt different was because it had the 2D bones. And I thought that was genius. Anyone who's producing a film or wants to, like, don't say, hey, we're making a 2D film, because instantly you're going to have people turn off and they're going to snooze and they're going to say pass. They're going to do the big X like on X Factor. Nope, not interested. It's all about the presentation. And he had
this boogeyman.
Yes, lovely presentation. I mean, of course, people like me, they're like, yes, exactly. Please do it. But the bigwigs, it's not going to work for them. So I loved that. Again, I really just wish Klaus would have been released in theaters. It's such a wholesome movie. It's so good. I understand Netflix's model, but it would be really cool if Netflix allowed some of their movies just to get like 2 months in theaters before they dropped it on Netflix, but whatever.
Well, I think they're trying to do that now because that's how you get nominated
they'll do it for a day or a few days, but they never, they'll never do a full, let's do 2 months in the theaters.
Right.
But also I really loved seeing that clip of Kobe Bryant and Glenn Keane together receiving the Oscar for Dear Basketball. It was such a powerful moment because you have these two icons of their craft. And probably at the time of filming, obviously Kobe Bryant is deceased now, but they were the greatest living legends of each of their industries.
Yeah.
Glenn Keane is probably the top legend currently of 2D animation, and obviously Kobe Bryant for his. And I just loved it. I thought it was so great. And Kobe Bryant, if you have not read up on him or know much about him, he is incredible. His work ethic is beyond anything you've ever known. He, for example, I went to a business conference, and one of the speakers, he has a podcast or a YouTube show called Impact Theory. And his big get was he was able to finally get Kobe Bryant. And it had, Kobe obviously is a very busy guy.
Oh, you went to it?
To his speech. Yeah.
Oh, well, with Kobe there though? Like
no. This was the guy who had the podcast. And he was sharing this experience. And so he was saying like, okay, we had 30 minutes. I had to be there at 5 a.m. or 5:30. And I was going to go from like this time to this time. And he's like, I knew that I wanted to, anyways, that's for a different story. But he gets there and Kobe Bryant is already in the office. This is like 4:30 in the morning and he's there and he's working, and he was just blown away because he thought Kobe would just kind of roll in and do his interview and be done. But then the same thing at practice, Kobe was always the last person to leave the court. There was another time of another guy was like, oh, I was just going to work. And so he was just shooting hoops. And Kobe was still there and he's shooting. And eventually this guy's like, I just had to give up because Kobe wasn't going to stop. And that's how Kobe was. Kobe was never going to be, he always was going to be the last one off the court because he was always going to outwork you no matter what, even if he was tired. And so anyways,
I heard that was also his thing. Like he wanted you to know he is going to outwork you.
Yeah. But I just thought, having them together and having this award was really great for Glenn Keane.
It was.
And Kobe Bryant, who obviously saw the value in the 2D animation and was able to turn to Glenn Keane. I mean, he had no idea who Glenn Keane was. He just saw what he put out and obviously picked the best guy possible. Yeah. It's just great. And, there is a boom here and it is coming. And YouTube has allowed for so many animators. There's my friend's brother is Odd Ones Out, who has tens of millions of subscribers. And I was at a thrift store the other day and I saw his book, on the bookshelves, and he has games and merch. And if you're on YouTube, you know who Odd Ones Out is most likely. And he's just really funny. He tells stories in such a fun way. His mom is a writer. And so I know she looks over his scripts and just really just refines them so they're funny and they hit and they punch in the right ways. And then on top of that, he's developed this animation style that's unique to him. And now he has a team, obviously. But, 2D is not done. It is still here. And I love the end credit scene of all of this. You know, it's just
it was so funny
because they kept showing this little like clip of her like sketching throughout, and I'm like, I don't know who that person is. Why do they keep showing her? That's fine, like she's just a character. But anyways, they had taken Ming Na and animated her and she was just bantering back and forth, and I thought it was just a really fun moment with Tom and that little skit.
Was it Tom or Tony?
I think it was Tom.
I think it was Tom. Sorry.
Oh, great. That's what you get when you're
Tom, and I was like, I think that's Tom.
We're sorry. We are worms, worthless worms. You can't tell the brothers apart.
No, it was because Tom is Mushu, and when I was living in Nashville, I went to a thing that he put on at Lipscomb University, and so I have met him and like in person, and so I was like, yeah, that is him.
I helped him out with something for his website. I helped him get in the right contacts with people for the Mermaid website, and he sent me a drawing of Mushu on top of Simba, and it says thank you, and it's sitting right here in my office, and I need to frame it. It's just so amazing. He's the best. Anyway, so I really liked this movie. I thought it was, as I was watching it, I just was into it. I really loved the history. I like that they go back and they really hit a lot of concepts. It could have been a miniseries where they just hit a lot of different aspects. But I like that it was very hopeful for 2D animation. It didn't say, wah, wah, it's dead.
Yeah.
All these guys were like, we're the busiest we've ever been in our careers. There is desire for this. And it's like, how at this point do we get the studios to see it? That's the next conundrum, the next big question to really figure out, because right now there's no faith in it. There's no trust, no pixie dust. So I don't know.
Well, you really do have to look at independent film. And I think that this is such a great, like you brought up YouTube, you brought up all these things where in reality, the gatekeepers of getting your, product out to the masses have completely dropped. If you're wanting to go into Disney, sure, they're still there. But if you're wanting to subvert the system and go in at it a different way, the audience is still there. Mm-hmm. And it's still wanting good quality something. Yeah. And we're just not getting it at the big studios. And so as an audience member, I hope that this gives lots of people that a little push to live in your excellence and stick with, go 10x.
It makes me want to draw. It just makes me want to sit down with a sketchbook and, hey, just
I'm not good at it at all. So it's like, that's not as
whatever
cute.
your thing is, do it.
But yeah, do it. Do your thing and make this the time to like I said, live in your excellence. Read the book. It's great.
So one thing before we end, I wanted to talk about, it kind of reminded me of obviously a few other documentaries about animation, not animated documentaries.
Right.
And other ones that were a must watch. Now, if I were to recommend, different books to people, I would do that. But documentaries specifically, I think that this would be on the list for sure. This is it tells an important story and history. I also think Waking Sleeping Beauty is critical. That talks about the resurgence of it goes into the Disney Renaissance a bit more. And another one that's super important is The Sweatbox.
Yes.
Which talks about the making of Emperor's New Groove and everything that happened there. Disney they're so dumb. They waste all this money creating new content for Disney Plus and, original series. And all they need to do is take the things that are hidden way back in the vault and release that. You know how many people would love and kill to see The Sweatbox because they've suppressed it and they've made it contraband. And it's like, fine, I'll go find it myself, Props to you if you're one of the people who've seen The Sweatbox, every once in a while when the link is alive for 24 hours before Disney takes it down. Yes. Right. Are there any other ones you can think of? We've done Persistence of Vision, but that's more about one particular movie and
it is
person.
An amazing movie, though.
I wouldn't add that to the list.
No. It's still a really good one.
Those are kind of these would be the three. And
if you're looking at books, Disney More is an absolute must.
I think we should do a separate episode. I've actually already created a doc for this. Top books for animation addicts. Talking about animation and Disney. And so I think our next episode is going to be this. So we'll add things to the list and it'll be good. If you want to really get deep involved and just have this knowledge of the history and how things are and how they used to be, this is what our next episode is going to be, the top books for animation addicts. I have a great running list already, and we were going to deep dive into all of those. Now, we have mentioned quite a few books here, and I want to remind you that we do have an Audible trial that you can test out. So if you want to listen to of Mice and Magic, or Disney War, which we will talk about, or what Chelsea said, 10x is easier than 2x, go to rotoscopers.com/audible. And that's where you're able to get an Audible trial. You get a 30-day trial with 1 credit that you can use for any book of your choice. So go ahead and use one of them for these. And they also have another offer where you can get 99 cents a month for the first 3 months. So technically for $3, you can get 3 credits. I think that's a pretty good deal too.
That's a good deal.
So if you go to rotoscopers.com/audible, both of those are there for you. Check them out, grab those offers, support the podcast, and we love you for it, especially for our next episode, which we will be diving into even more amazing books for animation addicts. Thank you so much to the team at Pencils and Pixels for sending us the screener link for this. And thank you for not closing it, even though the movie is available. We were able to watch it, and I appreciate it. So now we're talking about it. So thank you so much. This was a really great movie. I love everyone involved. Like I wish there was like some sort of cast party that I could go to, and I could just shake everyone's hands and be like, "Hi, I love you. Keep doing your work." But we love 2D animation. We love CG, but we think there's a place for them all. If you want to know your thoughts, go to rotoscopers.com/292 to share your thoughts. And until next time, we are the Rotoscopers.
That was a fun movie to watch.
It was.
I saw on the IMDb, the reviews or whatever, there's one guy who's like, "This thing sucks. Haven't we heard this before?" I was like,
okay.
Obviously, this wasn't meant for you.
Yeah. Sucks. Okay.
One of the producers was Tom Bancroft.
Yes. He's the director of Mulan.
Mulan. And so obviously he's...
Hold on. Tony directed it, not Tom.
Oh, okay.
Let's say that again.
Okay.
Tom did Mushu. Tony directed.
Right.
Tom has an M for Mushu.
Yeah.
And Tony directed.
Good. Got it.
We just totally look over this part that says like, pick from sponsor list. We're not great podcasters because we're like, whatever. Like, who needs the money? But we do. That's the thing.
We definitely do.
We do.
It would be very helpful.
Okay. Well, we'll be better.